Oh.
Mom!
I'm Mary Hart, filling in for Bob Dole. I feel like we could be doing an episode of Hard Fork right now, but Kevin Roos is off sick, and I'm joined with Casey Newton. How are you?
I'm so good, Courtney. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. My country, Australia, took some drastic first steps in banning social media for people under 16.
Yeah, so tell me what you think about this.
It's weird, right? Because it's this question of restricted use. We have it on alcohol. We have seatbelts in cars. We have speed limits. All of those things make sense. It depends on what the social media is. And I know there's different restrictions for different ones. I think maybe YouTube is allowed in some circumstances. Yep. It's this weird thing where I know that there's probably some ideological argument that maybe I disagree with, but when I actually think about the real-world application, I think if you're under 16, it is a gift that you are not allowed on social media in Australia. Yeah. And it's one thing if your parents have said no, but then you go to school and all the other kids have it. But it's another thing if no one's allowed to have it. And yes, there will be people who always, come up with workarounds, but I think it's a positive. I'll be interested to see how it goes.
Yeah, I think where I'm at is 13 and under, I'm all the way on board. It's yes, I don't think there's any reason for somebody who is under 13 to have a social media account. Mm-hmm. With the 13, 14s, 15s, I will say that I do think of the LGBT kids and the ones who are maybe in a small town, they're isolated, they're being bullied, they are having trouble connecting with people like them. And is there a way that they go onto the Instagram Explore page or the TikTok For You feed and they just see other people who look like them and it makes them feel a little bit less alone in the world? When I was growing up as a gay kid, I did not have access to that. I think I would have liked to have had that. So, I'm not saying that's a perfect argument for insisting that kids, between say 13 and 16 ought to have social media. There's obviously a lot of risks and dangers on those apps too, but I don't know.
Are there guardrails that could be Instagram for teens?
Yeah.
But then I guess the problem is who is the arbiter of what is and what isn't allowed? And as we're seeing in the United States, that small town, if it's a state-by-state thing or a federal thing, that child might not actually, or that young person might not be able to access queer content because of the law of the land.
Completely, yeah. It's all getting really, really messy and really tricky. I suspect that in the end, whether or not these social apps get banned, no one is going to ban YouTube. And so that is probably just how LGBT kids are going to find each other when they are young, but we'll see.
It's easy to savor more this summer with nutritious 2-minute meals from Factor. Just heat up and enjoy, giving you more time to do what you want, like pumping iron in the gym or twirling in your favorite dress at the club. I do both. Get started at factormeals.com/Courtney50off and use code Courtney50off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box.
What happens when we talk about this free speech conversation when it comes to AI and what we want to allow and what we don't want to allow?
Yeah, so in general, we want to build tools that enable lots of different kinds of expression. But on the other hand, you're also going to create harms when you do that.
Do we just have to draw some arbitrary lines?
Yeah, I think you can create regulations that guide this. I personally don't think it should be legal to create a deep fake nude of someone or to create deep fake porn, where I showed somebody, engaged in a sex act without their consent. And some states have passed those sorts of laws, but we don't really have a consensus about it. But, other stuff gets trickier. For example, what if I wanted to use ChatGPT to just write the meanest possible review of this podcast and just be I want you to absolutely read Courtney to filth, leave no stone untouched, just leave her in absolute tears. As a fan of yours and a guest on this podcast, I don't want to see anyone do that. On the other hand, should it be illegal? Probably not. So maybe we just want OpenAI to say, you know what, we're not going to let you use ChatGPT to write super mean podcast reviews. But there's a million different like edge cases and exceptions. And so these companies wind up hiring these teams who just spend all day long having some like truly hilarious arguments. If I could just quickly share, the previous generation of these conversations were not about chatbots, they were about social networks, right? It was like sort of like, what can you post on Instagram? When is it okay to show a nipple? When is it not okay to show a nipple? And I talked to a moderator one time who said they'd been in an hour-long meeting about what they called butt focus. And the reason that they needed to be in a butt focus meeting was you were allowed to show a bare ass in certain contexts if it was not considered to be the focus of the image. If it was just, I took a photo on a nude beach and there's a bum, a few hundred yards away. But then they would wind up having all these meetings where they're looking at pictures of butts trying to decide whether that was the focus or not. Anyway, I bring that up because what we're talking about is content moderation, and it's basically impossible to do without getting into some of the most insane arguments you can imagine.
I mean, earlier this year, we heard Mark Zuckerberg switch the term content moderation for censorship.
Yes.
Which was an interesting twist.
Yeah.
When does content moderation become censorship?
Yeah. The original meaning of censorship came from when the government would say you can't say something, right? Like a newspaper would want to publish an expose about the government, and the government would step in before it was published and say, you cannot publish that or we will send you to jail. That's like the original definition of censorship. But as you get into the 2010s and the 2020s, social media platforms become the place where many, maybe even most political discussions are taking place. And when that starts to become the case and people are engaging in political speech, and that speech is removed by Mark Zuckerberg or his team of moderators, it might not be censorship in the original sense of the word, but it feels like censorship to people who experience it, right? And so we've just had a debate about it now going on for about a decade of essentially what are the right lines to draw. It's gotten super political. I think Republicans have made a lot of really bad faith arguments about this, right? They'll do something horrible online and then it will get removed for good reason and they will throw up their hands and cry censorship. Maybe there was a good reason why it was removed in the first place, right? But this is just one of those subjects that has become so important that it is in everyone's interest to protest constantly about whatever their particular point of view is.
I think of the gay wedding cake argument of Yore, and there's an interesting idea where if we're forcing people to make cakes that are against their beliefs, then we also have to accept that we have to allow people whose beliefs we don't agree with into our spaces and businesses and so on. So it's kind of like this amorphous fine line of working out, like, what's the best rule for the most number of people, I guess.
I think that's right. Like, I mean, that's like utilitarianism, and I basically support you. I do want to find the best rule for the most number of people. In the case of like an LGBT couple who wants a cake, I think it's in the best interest of most people to say to businesses, you just like have to, you can't discriminate on people like based on their sexual orientation. But other people feel differently. And unfortunately, many of them are on the Supreme Court.
Take on the summer with nutritious 2-minute meals with Factor. Just heat up and enjoy, giving you more time to do what you love, like fanning yourself slowly in the cool night air wearing a silk chemise while you wait for your lover to come home. Factor meals pack in the flavor with none of the fuss. So get started at factormeals.com/Courtney50off and use code Courtney50off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box.
I mean, I guess the other thing about these tech corporations and the idea of censorship is, yes, traditionally that term was reserved for government, but these corporations, in many cases, are bigger than many nation states and have much more power and reach.
It is such an important point. When I started writing about tech companies, they were big and important, but they also looked like businesses. You looked at like their revenue and their number of users, and they just kind of looked like a business. But you fast forward today, and you're absolutely right. Facebook has more than 3 billion people who use its family of apps every single day. It is bigger than most countries on Earth. And so these are political decisions. And the people who lead these companies are effectively heads of state, and they are beholden to the political pressures that heads of state are under. And so when you look at the way that tech companies negotiate with various national governments these days, it looks like diplomacy. It looks like when one foreign head of state, goes to visit another. It's just been a really interesting transition to watch.
But with a slightly messy caveat of unfettered capitalism and shareholders involved.
Yeah.
So whereas a government traditionally is meant to act in the for the good of its constituents.
Yes, I do think that era is behind us. But yeah, it was a lovely era, and
it was a lovely era.
If it could come back someday, that'd be great.
How do we make it come back, or do we just have to look forward and work out how we can kind of I don't know, build dams to funnel this stream into a place that is better for everybody?
I would love to find out. I mean, I think that, I'm a believer in democracy. I think everybody should have a say in who leads them. And I think we should elect people who are looking out for our interests and not, for example, corporate interests. But I'm not sure that message is really resonating, at least with the majority of Americans right now.
Yeah.
So
I have an idea.
Oh, what's that?
What about this?
Okay.
What about this?
Okay.
And I'm thinking it's Norway or one of the Scandi countries because they've always been good like that. What if Norway has a national AI that rules the country in a fair way that avoids corruption and all of the people prosper, everybody has enough. I'm not going to rely on the future positive of AI to come from, I'm sorry, the United States and the big hitters there.
Yeah.
But what about is there a world where some country somewhere could show us a utopian version of AI and that we all go, oh, that's actually a good idea?
It's a fascinating question. And, one of the big stories in AI over the past month or so has been the emergence of this Chinese model called DeepSeek. Did you follow this one?
Yeah.
So without going
Of course, I listened to every episode.
Okay, that was a test and you passed, so good job.
Good.
The important thing to say about, DeepSeek is just that China figured out a way to catch up to the American state-of-the-art really quickly. And once other countries saw that, they got really excited because they thought, oh, maybe we could actually catch up really quickly too. So I do think that there is a chance that some of these other countries, maybe with less money than they previously would have thought that they would have had to invest, can come up with their own powerful AI models.
I mean, Norway's pretty rich, but
that's great to hear. Is it single? I would love to see it if Norway or another country could figure out ways to put AI into the service of democracy, into the service of helping people. Because again, I think it really can. It's just going to be a question of in whose hands is this very powerful AI.
I mean, when we're thinking about the Department of Government Efficiency, I feel like government efficiency could be handled really well by an AI system.
Yeah.
Is that where a positive application of AI?
Yeah, absolutely. Without trying to completely buy into the Doge narrative, do I think that there is waste in the federal government? Sure. Could you use some sort of AI system to try to identify that waste in a systematic way and maybe bring it to the attention of an inspector general and clean up some of that waste? Absolutely. That's just an extension of the way that we already use technology in government, right? I think the danger, though, is that that's not the way that AI is going to be used in government, that it's going to be sort of much more ham-fisted and implemented in ways that don't have a lot of safeguards to make sure that people aren't being hurt.
Big old orange ham fists.
Yes.
Ad-free versions and extended episodes of RnR with Courtney Act are available on Mum Plus Gold at patreon.com/mumplus.
You had actual celebrities on this podcast. I'm delighted to be here, but I'm worried you've made a terrible mistake.
No, you're a celebrity to me, see.
Okay.